This is Omar Nashashibi from Washington, D.C. with an update on the latest with the 301 digital services tax dispute between the United States, the European Union, India, the United Kingdom, Spain, and a number of other countries that are out there. The U.S. on June 5th announced that they were taking action, a formal 301 trade investigation into digital service taxes being adopted or proposed by a number of 8 nations and in addition to the EU countries. This marks a significant advancement in the trade dispute between the U.S. and some of its traditional allies in the space of digital service taxes. Many will remind themselves that in 2019, early on in the year, the U.S. and France were engaged in pretty deep negotiations as the French were intending on imposing their own sets of digital services tax, to which the United States announced they were going to retaliate in the form of tariffs. In this announcement on June 5th, the U.S. Trade Representative Office said that the action is in response to efforts by these countries to impose this tax on revenue derived in their jurisdictions by digital services firms such as Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and Google. The U.S. believes that the digital service taxes intentionally target large U.S.-based technology companies. The U.S. is accepting comments on their proposed action on whether or not the digital service taxes are impacting U.S. consumers, U.S. businesses, and U.S. technology development through July 15th. The digital service tax has provoked an angry response from Washington because they view this not just as a tax issue, but also as a trade issue about digital services that are exported by U.S. companies overseas. Over the past 2 years, various jurisdictions have taken under consideration or have already adopted taxes on revenues that certain companies generate in their jurisdictions by providing certain digital services in those countries. This action is typically a precursor to the imposition of actual tariffs. What we saw during the French case in 2019, the Section 301 tariffs could have imposed up to 100% tariffs on imports from France in that case. You also would remember that the Section 301 tariffs are the same ones that are currently being imposed on over 7,000 products from China at either a rate of 25% or at 7.5%, lowered from the 15% proposed. So you can see that the Section 301 tools that this administration has been using have been pretty broad, whether it is in the Boeing and aviation aircraft dispute, or that is here in the case of digital service taxes, or again with intellectual property theft and other allegations against China in their operations. So we're now seeing an expanded scope here beyond what we were looking at last year in 2019 with France. Going back to where we are right now and in the French section, what the U.S. was considering at the time, to give you perspective of how it impacts today's broader action with the entire EU, the UK, Italy, India, and Spain, and 5 other nations, is to look at what they were looking at last year. The U.S. had threatened to impose retaliatory tariffs of $2.4 billion worth of goods on French imports into the United States in response to the French taxes, which would have amounted to roughly about 3% of revenue that those companies derived within that country and their jurisdiction. So what happened in 2019, both sides agreed to not move forward through 2020, meaning the French would not move forward with their digital service tax on U.S. companies, and the United States would not move forward by imposing the $2.4 billion worth of tariffs on French goods coming into the United States. But returning back to the current Section 301 case on digital service taxes, nearly 140 countries at the OECD are currently negotiating a solution that many EU leaders frankly believe they are very close to coming to, with the exception of the United States still raising some concerns. The thought here is that if the OECD can come together on an agreement across the board on an international digital service taxes agreement, then it will forego any need for retaliatory tariffs from the United States. However, we understand here in Washington there are still some concerns about any type of global tax on digital services, particularly those that appear to target U.S. companies. So as of right now, we're still a couple of steps away from formally the president imposing or even offering up tariffs to be imposed on products. We do not have a proposed tariff list for these products coming in from the EU and the other nations that are out there. We hope to see something like that in the spring, probably around the fall or so after Labor Day in September, if they are going to move forward. Our understanding is from now until July 15th, they'll be accepting comments on whether or not to move forward into the next step. And so in the coming month or so, we should have a better sense of how the U.S. is going to respond to digital services taxes being proposed from overseas.